The hidden dangers of U.S. prisons, what actually kills inmates. The myth of the cell and the reality of the system. Most people imagine death in prison as something sudden and violent, a stabbing in a shower room, a riot that spirals out of control, an execution chamber behind sealed doors. That image is convenient. It keeps the public focused on rare, dramatic moments instead of the slow, systemic processes that actually end most inmate lives. The truth is less cinematic and far more disturbing. In U.S. prisons, death is usually quiet. It happens in medical units that resemble storage closets. In segregation cells where no one is watching. In dorms where complaints are logged, ignored, and buried under paperwork. The majority of inmate deaths are not caused by overt brutality, they are caused by neglect, delay, indifference, and structural design. The system doesn't need to actively kill. It only needs to fail consistently. A population designed to die early. The U.S. prison population is older, sicker, and more medically fragile than the general public. Decades of harsh sentencing laws have produced thousands of inmates serving 20, 30, or life sentences, long after their bodies have broken down. Chronic illness is the norm, not the exception. Hypertension, diabetes, heart disease, respiratory disorders, untreated infections, and mental illness dominate prison medical records. Many inmates arrive already sick due to poverty, limited healthcare access, addiction, and homelessness. Prison does not fix these problems. It compounds them. Healthcare in prison is not preventative. It is reactive and minimal, designed to keep inmates alive just long enough to avoid lawsuits. A chest pain complaint becomes an ibuprofen prescription. A persistent cough becomes a wait list. A seizure history becomes a note buried in a file no one reads until it's too late. When inmates die, official reports often say natural causes. But natural causes inside an artificial environment designed for deprivation mean something very different. Medical care that exists on paper. Every U.S. prison system claims to provide constitutionally adequate healthcare. On paper, this is true. In practice, access is filtered through layers of bureaucracy that discourage treatment. To see a doctor, an inmate usually must submit a written request, wait days or weeks for triage, be evaluated by undertrained staff, receive approval for off-site care, if needed be transported under security protocols that delay everything. Each step introduces friction. Each delay increases risk. Many facilities charge medical copays, forcing inmates earning cents per hour to choose between healthcare and basic hygiene items. As a result, inmates often wait until conditions become unbearable before seeking help, at which point intervention is more expensive, more complicated, and less effective. Deaths from untreated infections, internal bleeding, or cardiac events are rarely sudden. They follow a pattern: repeated complaints, dismissal or misdiagnosis, delayed escalation, collapse, emergency response that arrives too late. By the time an ambulance is called, the outcome is often already decided. Correctional medicine is not medicine. Prison healthcare providers operate under different incentives than civilian doctors. Their primary responsibility is not patient advocacy, it is institutional risk management. Security overrides care. Doctors work with guards present. Confidentiality is limited. Treatment options are constrained by cost contracts. Many facilities outsource medical care to private companies paid flat rates per inmate, a structure that rewards spending less, not treating more. Specialists are rare. Diagnostic equipment is limited. Follow-ups are inconsistent. When inmates die, internal reviews focus on whether policy was followed, not whether the policy itself is lethal. The system protects itself first. Mental illness. The silent multiplier. Mental illness does not directly kill most inmates, but it makes every other risk worse. In U.S. prisons, serious mental illness is widespread and poorly managed. Many facilities lack psychiatric staff. Therapy is minimal or non-existent. Medication changes are frequent and often abrupt due to supply or staffing issues. Mentally ill inmates are more likely to be placed in solitary confinement, miss medical appointments, fail to report symptoms clearly, be disciplined instead of treated, deteriorate physically and cognitively. Solitary confinement, in particular, accelerates decline. Isolation worsens anxiety, depression, psychosis, and cognitive impairment. Inmates stop eating properly. They sleep irregularly. They lose awareness of their own physical condition. By the time a mentally ill inmate experiences a medical crisis, they may be unable to articulate what's happening, or may not be believed even if they try. Heat, cold, and environmental death. Prisons are not built for comfort. In many states, they are not built for survival. Extreme heat kills inmates every year. Older facilities lack air conditioning. Temperatures inside cells can exceed 100 degrees Fahrenheit. Dehydration, heat exhaustion, and heat stroke disproportionately affect inmates with heart conditions, psychiatric medications, or obesity. Cold is less publicized but equally dangerous. In winter, some facilities fail to maintain adequate heating. Inmates sleep in layers, using towels and paper as insulation. Respiratory illnesses spread rapidly in cold, crowded environments. Ventilation is often poor. Mold, dust, and stagnant air worsen asthma and lung disease. Outbreaks of flu, pneumonia, tuberculosis, and COVID-19 thrive in these conditions. Environmental stress weakens the body long before death occurs. Violence isn't random, it's structural. While this series focuses on non-obvious causes of death, violence cannot be ignored. But prison violence is rarely spontaneous. It is a predictable outcome of overcrowding, understaffing, and unmanaged populations. When facilities operate beyond capacity, medical access declines, mental health care collapses, tensions rise, guards rely on force instead of control, violence increases, and medical response time decreases. Inmates injured in fights often face delayed treatment due to lockdowns, staff shortages, or administrative hesitation. What might be survivable outside becomes fatal inside. Again, the death is not the punch or the weapon, it's the delay. Death notices and administrative language. When an inmate dies, families receive brief notifications. Cause of death is often summarized in vague terms. Internal investigations conclude with phrases like, "No policy violations found." The paperwork closes quickly. Rarely does anyone examine the months or years leading up to that moment, the missed appointments, the ignored grievances, the untreated symptoms, the environmental stress, the mental health deterioration. The system counts the death, files it, and moves on. Because from an administrative perspective, the inmate is no longer a problem. Solitary confinement is often described as a disciplinary tool. In official language, it is called administrative segregation, restrictive housing, or special management. The words are clean. The reality is not. For tens of thousands of inmates across the United States, solitary confinement is not a temporary measure. It is a living condition that lasts months, years, sometimes decades. And while it is rarely listed as a cause of death on paper, it is one of the most lethal environments in the prison system. Solitary confinement does not kill quickly. It dismantles the human body in stages. The architecture of isolation: a typical solitary confinement cell measures between 6 and 8 feet wide and 10 feet long. Inside, a concrete slab for a bed, a toilet sink unit, a steel door with a narrow slot, and often no window to the outside world. Inmates spend 22 to 24 hours a day alone. Meals are pushed through slots. Recreation, if granted, happens in cages or small yards where no one speaks. Human contact is reduced to brief commands shouted by guards or muffled voices through walls. Lighting is constant or poorly regulated. Silence is broken by mechanical noise, distant shouting, or nothing at all. This environment is not neutral. It is biologically hostile. The nervous system under siege: human brains evolved for social interaction, movement, and sensory input. Solitary confinement removes all three. Within days or weeks, the nervous system begins to malfunction. Stress hormones remain elevated. Sleep cycles collapse. Cognitive processing slows. Inmates report chronic insomnia, panic attacks, hallucinations, memory loss, disorientation, emotional numbness. But beyond psychological symptoms, something more dangerous happens. The body's ability to regulate itself starts to fail. Heart rate variability decreases. Blood pressure becomes unstable. Immune function weakens. Existing conditions worsen rapidly. Solitary confinement doesn't introduce disease, it accelerates everything already present. Medical neglect amplified by isolation in general population housing. Inmates at least have informal safeguards, cellmates who notice distress, other inmates who alert staff, movement that forces interaction. In solitary, none of that exists. If an inmate experiences chest pain, a seizure, severe dehydration, or internal bleeding, there is often no one to witness it. Emergency call buttons may not exist, may be ignored, or may not be reachable if the inmate collapses. Guards conduct periodic checks, but these are often visual and brief. If an inmate is lying still, wrapped in a blanket, or unresponsive but breathing, the moment passes. Many deaths in solitary are discovered hours later, sometimes during meal delivery, sometimes during shift change. The official cause of death may read, cardiac arrest. What it does not say is that the inmate spent weeks reporting symptoms through written requests that were never answered. Medication disruption and fatal consequences. Solitary confinement frequently involves changes in medication routines. Inmates may miss doses due to lockdowns, have medications delayed or discontinued, be switched abruptly to cheaper alternatives, lose access to mental health prescriptions for individuals with epilepsy, heart disease, diabetes, or severe psychiatric disorders. This instability is dangerous. Sudden withdrawal from psychiatric medications can cause seizures, heart rhythm abnormalities, and extreme agitation. Combined with isolation, these effects intensify. Deaths linked to medication mismanagement are rarely labeled as such. They are categorized as complications or natural causes. But outside prison walls, the same sequence would trigger malpractice investigations. Starvation, dehydration, and passive death. Solitary confinement does not require force to kill. It allows people to stop sustaining themselves. Depression and sensory deprivation often lead inmates to stop eating. Meals are unappetizing, cold, and repetitive. Appetite fades. Motivation disappears. Some inmates refuse food intentionally. Others simply lose the will to eat. Hydration declines as well. Access to clean water can be inconsistent. Mental fog makes self-care harder. Weight loss accelerates. Electrolyte imbalances develop. Organs weaken. By the time staff recognize a problem, the inmate may already be in organ failure. Again, paperwork will say medical complications. The cell will be cleaned. Another inmate will take its place. Suicide as an outcome, not an event. Suicide is one of the leading causes of death in U.S. jails and prisons, and solitary confinement is the strongest predictor. But focusing on the final act misses the larger truth. Solitary confinement creates suicidal ideation in people who did not previously have it. It strips away identity, time perception, and hope. Days blur. Weeks dissolve. The future becomes meaningless. When inmates die by suicide in solitary, investigations often emphasize individual vulnerability, history of mental illness, refused treatment, did not report distress. What is rarely acknowledged is that the environment itself is the trigger. Even inmates without prior psychiatric diagnoses develop symptoms after prolonged isolation. The brain adapts by turning inward, and often against itself. Why solitary deaths are predictable. The most disturbing aspect of solitary confinement deaths is not that they occur, it is that they follow known patterns. Studies, lawsuits, and internal reports have documented for decades that isolation, increases mortality risk, exacerbates chronic illness, leads to higher suicide rates, impairs emergency response, yet the practice continues, largely unchanged. Why? Because solitary confinement is administratively convenient. It simplifies control. It reduces staffing complexity. It isolates difficult inmates rather than addressing underlying problems. The cost is human life, spread out over time, invisible to the public. Case reviews without accountability. When an inmate dies in solitary, the review process focuses on compliance. Were checks performed? Was paperwork completed? Were policies followed? Rarely does anyone ask whether the policy itself is lethal. If a guard checked a cell every 30 minutes and saw an inmate breathing, the system considers its duty fulfilled, even if that inmate was slowly dying from dehydration, withdrawal, or untreated illness. Legal accountability is rare. Civil cases take years. Settlements are paid without admissions of wrongdoing. The practice continues. Isolation as a force multiplier. Solitary confinement does not act alone. It magnifies every other danger inside prison. Poor medical care becomes deadly, mental illness becomes catastrophic, minor health issues become fatal, delays become irreversible. It is not just a place inmates die, it is a mechanism that makes death more likely. And because it happens behind solid doors, the public rarely sees it. Overcrowding is not just a lack of space. It is a chain reaction that degrades every function inside a prison at the same time: medical care, supervision, sanitation, nutrition, emergency response, and mental stability. When combined with chronic understaffing, it creates conditions where death becomes not only possible, but statistically inevitable. Most inmate deaths tied to overcrowding never appear dramatic. They look like heart attacks, infections, accidents, or violence. But behind each incident is a system stretched beyond its limits. Designed capacity versus human reality. Many U.S. prisons operate well above their intended capacity. Facilities built decades ago for smaller populations now hold far more people than they were designed to manage. Capacity figures are not cosmetic. They determine how many guards are assigned per shift, how quickly medical staff can respond, how often inmates can move, how sanitation systems function, how much attention each inmate receives. When population exceeds capacity, every service slows down, but risk speeds up. A prison built to house 1,000 inmates but holding 1,400 is not 40% more dangerous. It is exponentially more dangerous. The guard shortage nobody sees. Understaffing is the silent partner to overcrowding. Correctional officers are leaving faster than they can be replaced. Long hours, forced overtime, low pay relative to risk, and high burnout have hollowed out staffing rosters across the country. The result: fewer officers supervising more inmates, longer response times to emergencies, increased reliance on lockdowns, reduced movement for medical visits, less monitoring of vulnerable individuals. One officer may be responsible for dozens, sometimes hundreds, of inmates at once. When something goes wrong, help does not arrive quickly. Sometimes it does not arrive at all. Medical emergencies in a locked system. In a civilian setting, medical emergencies rely on speed. In prison, speed is obstructed by security. When an inmate collapses, a guard must notice, a radio call must be made, a supervisor must approve movement, medical staff must be available, doors must be unlocked in sequence. Each step takes time. In overcrowded, understaffed facilities, that time stretches dangerously long. Heart attacks, strokes, asthma attacks, diabetic emergencies, and seizures do not wait for clearance protocols. Many inmate deaths occur not because treatment was impossible, but because it arrived too late. Lockdowns as a death accelerator. Overcrowding increases tension. Tension increases incidents. Incidents trigger lockdowns. Lockdowns are meant to restore order, but they have lethal side effects. Medical appointments are cancelled, medications are delayed, meals are rushed or reduced, movement stops, monitoring decreases. An inmate who misses insulin doses during a lockdown does not receive special accommodation. A prisoner with chest pain waits until lockdown ends, if it ends in time. Lockdowns turn manageable conditions into crises. Violence fueled by density. Crowded prisons are violent prisons. This is not opinion, it is math. More people in confined space means increased competition for resources, heightened stress, more gang enforcement, faster escalation of disputes. When fights break out in overcrowded units, officers often cannot intervene immediately. Backup may be delayed. Medical response may be postponed until the area is secured. An injury that could be treated quickly outside becomes fatal inside. Again, the cause of death may be listed as blunt force trauma or complications, not overcrowding. Sanitation breakdown and disease. Overcrowding overwhelms sanitation systems. Showers back up. Toilets malfunction. Trash accumulates. Laundry cycles stretch longer. Clean clothing becomes scarce. In these conditions, infectious diseases spread rapidly. Skin infections, respiratory illnesses, gastrointestinal outbreaks, bloodborne pathogens. Weakened immune systems, already compromised by stress, poor nutrition, and chronic illness, fail faster. Deaths from infection are often classified as unavoidable medical outcomes. The role of environmental collapse is rarely acknowledged. Nutrition as a compounding risk. Overcrowded prisons cut costs where they can, and food is an easy target. Meals become smaller, less nutritious, more processed, less consistent. For inmates with chronic conditions, poor nutrition accelerates decline. For older inmates, it weakens already fragile systems. Malnutrition does not kill immediately. It erodes resilience. When illness or injury strikes, the body has nothing left to draw from. Mental health collapse in crowded facilities. Mental health care collapses first under overcrowding. Psychiatric staff are overwhelmed. Appointments are delayed or cancelled. Therapy becomes impossible. Medication management becomes unstable. Mentally ill inmates deteriorate faster in crowded environments. Paranoia increases. Anxiety spikes. Psychosis worsens. These inmates are more likely to miss medical care, be involved in incidents, be placed in segregation, be ignored when reporting symptoms. Their deaths are often framed as personal failures, not systemic ones. When time becomes the killer in overcrowded prisons, time itself becomes lethal. Delays compound. Delays in care, delays in response, delays in diagnosis, delays in transport. A few minutes lost to procedure becomes an hour. An hour becomes irreversible damage. Damage becomes death. Every inmate death has a timeline. In overcrowded facilities, that timeline is stretched past the point of recovery. Why these deaths are considered acceptable? Overcrowding persists because it is normalized. As long as deaths can be attributed to natural causes, individual behavior, pre-existing conditions, unavoidable incidents, the system avoids responsibility. Rarely are deaths traced back to staffing ratios, capacity limits, or policy decisions made years earlier. Overcrowding does not leave bruises. It leaves spreadsheets. The illusion of control. Administrators often claim that despite overcrowding, facilities remain safe and secure. This language is carefully chosen. Safe for whom? Secure in what sense? Control does not equal care. Order does not equal survival. A prison can function administratively while failing biologically. Most people imagine prison as a place for the young and violent. The reality inside U.S. prisons today looks very different. Cell blocks are filling with walkers, wheelchairs, oxygen tanks, and men and women who are far closer to death than release. This did not happen by accident. It is the long-term consequence of sentencing policy. Mandatory minimums, 3 strikes laws, life without parole, and extreme sentence stacking have created a population that is aging rapidly behind bars. Prisons were never designed to function as nursing homes, chronic care facilities, or hospices. Yet that is exactly what many of them have become: badly equipped, understaffed, and institutionally indifferent. For thousands of inmates, the sentence is not incarceration. It is slow medical extinction. The oldest prison population in the Western world, the United States, incarcerates more elderly people than any other country. Inmate does not mean healthy. By the time prisoners reach their 50s and 60s, their bodies resemble those of people 10 to 15 years older outside prison. Stress, poor nutrition, violence exposure, untreated illness, and years of inadequate health care accelerate aging dramatically. An inmate in their 50s often presents like a civilian in their late 60s or 70s. Common conditions include heart disease, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, kidney failure, diabetes with complications, advanced arthritis, dementia, cancer. Diagnosed late. Prison is not equipped to manage these conditions properly, and it is not incentivized to try. Life without parole as a medical sentence. Life without parole is often discussed as a moral or legal punishment. In practice, it is a healthcare decision made by the state. It guarantees that illness will be treated minimally, aging will occur in custody, death will happen behind bars. There is no requirement that prisons provide end-of-life care equivalent to civilian standards. Palliative care exists inconsistently. Hospice programs, where they exist at all, are often staffed by other inmates with minimal training. Pain management is conservative. Diagnostic testing is delayed. Experimental or advanced treatments are rarely approved. Not because they are ineffective, but because the patient is not going anywhere. Delayed diagnoses and terminal discoveries. Cancer is one of the most revealing examples of how prison systems fail aging inmates. Symptoms are often dismissed as routine aches, weight loss attributed to stress, fatigue blamed on depression. Screening is inconsistent. Preventive testing is rare. Many inmates are diagnosed only when tumors or advanced organs are failing. Treatment options are limited at that point. Care shifts from intervention to containment. The inmate is not transferred to specialized facilities quickly. Security concerns delay transport. Appointments are missed. Pain management becomes the priority, not survival. The death is recorded as illness-related. The system avoids scrutiny. Compassionate release that rarely arrives on paper. Compassionate release exists. In reality, it is functionally inaccessible. To qualify, inmates must often prove they are terminally ill, permanently incapacitated, no longer a threat. The process is slow, bureaucratic, and adversarial. Medical documentation is disputed. Prosecutors oppose release. Hearings are delayed. Many inmates die waiting for approval. By the time release is granted, if it is granted at all, the individual is often too ill to leave or dies shortly after. Compassion becomes symbolic, not practical. Deaths that save the system money. This is the most uncomfortable truth, and the least discussed. Elderly inmates are expensive. They require frequent medical attention, specialized equipment, hospital transport, increased staffing. From a purely administrative standpoint, death reduces cost. There is no official policy encouraging neglect. There doesn't need to be. The incentive structure already points in that direction. Minimal care keeps liability low. Advanced care increases expense and legal exposure. Release creates political backlash. Death resolves all three. End of life in a locked room. When inmates die of illness, it is rarely peaceful. They die in infirmary beds guarded by armed officers, in cells modified for medical observation, in segregation units repurposed as isolation wards. Family visits are limited or denied. Final conversations are brief and supervised. Dignity is secondary to procedure. In many cases, fellow inmates provide comfort, not professionals. The system treats death as an administrative event, not a human one. After death, the final erasure. Once an inmate dies, personal property is inventoried, records are closed, the body is transferred, the cell is reassigned. Internal investigations focus on compliance, not causation. Families struggle to obtain medical records. Autopsies raise more questions than answers. Civil suits take years and often end quietly. There is no public reckoning. No systemic correction. The death becomes a statistic. What actually kills inmates? After examining every layer of the system, the answer becomes clear. Most inmates are not killed by guards, other prisoners, executions. They are killed by delay, neglect, isolation, overcrowding, policy, inertia, administrative indifference. Death is not an aberration in U.S. prisons. It is a predictable outcome for the most vulnerable populations confined within them. The system does not need malice to be lethal. It only needs to function exactly as it does. The final reality: prisons were built to punish, control, and contain, not to care for the sick, the old, or the dying. As sentences grow longer and populations age, prisons have quietly become places where people are sent to die slowly, out of public view. Not with violence. Not with spectacle. But with paperwork, locked doors, and time.